Hey everyone, welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. The live chat will begin momentarily, so start loading up your questions in the chat. And don't be afraid to give the episode a like as well. Of course, you can't stay for the entire thing. You can check everything out on demand after the fact on the DraftKings YouTube page, or if you just want the podcast version, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Audio Boom, Google Play, iHeartRadio, everywhere where you can download podcasts. You'll be able to listen to this live chat on demand. Reid Fowler will be joining me on the line. I do want to let everyone know that my cheat sheet has been updated on the DKPlaybook.com page, and of course Adam Hadwin has withdrawn. That's why I had to go update it, so you can check out, see where my new pivot plays are, where the ownership is going to fall to, and Reid and I will for sure discuss that, along with the weather and everything else in between. And the stats that we're using today when we refer to in the field numbers come from fantasynational.com, so go become a member at fantasynational.com today, all right? Perfect. Let's get to this.
The Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience RBC Heritage live chat. So start filling it up. It's going to be more difficult to get to the Periscope questions, but if you're watching on YouTube, we'll get to all of those. Myself and Reid Fowler from DK Live. Plus, if you use the hashtag DK Live on Twitter, that's where I'll be pulling from to see where people are leaving questions for the Heritage. Quick notes off the top. Reid and I will discuss the weather in just a second, but Adam Hadwin has withdrawn. He was $8,100. He was projected to be a top 5 owned player this week, so we don't know where that ownership's going to go, but do not play Adam Hadwin because he is not playing. That's my number 1 5-star pick of the week. Don't play Adam Hadwin. Reid, what's going on, dude?
Nothing much. Just coming off the Masters, and yeah, that Adam Hadwin news came out of nowhere. So you got to change a lot of lineups. He was one of my top plays as well. It'll be interesting to see where that ownership goes because there's some names around there that he can we can definitely see coming in too. So
and where do you think that you're going to go? I readjusted my lineups a little bit earlier, so when you have Adam Hadwin at $8,100, you look right below him and you see a former winner of this event, Jim Furyk. I think that he is the riskiest play of everyone in this range because I already had a bunch of Bryson, I had a bunch of Kevin Na, I had a bunch of Jason Duffner and Chappell who are right below him. I think that Zach Johnson will absorb a lot of this ownership, but I just feel like everyone's going to bypass Jim Furyk. So I initially, out of my 20 lineups, had 5 Adam Hadwin teams. I now have 2 Jim Furyk teams, and I just piled one more onto Kevin Na, one more onto Kevin Chappell, and then one more onto Bryson and went on my way. What are you going to do with those shares?
yeah, I think like you said, I think a lot of people will move to Zach Johnson. I think he plays these die courses right really well, Colonial, RBC, and some of these guys. So you'll see a lot. I think a lot of ownership go towards, and that name value is there right as well. I would like to see Chappell. I mean, Jason Day is a guy who's not playing, but who does well on die courses. And we always make that correlation, right? Chappell and Jason Day have a good correlation with if this is a good course for Jason Day, it's a good course for Chappell. Now, obviously, Day's not playing. So I would want to move more of those shares onto Chappell. He's coming with great form. So I do like Chappell. He kind of burned us, right, a little bit at the Masters. So I think a lot of guys will be off him. That's why I would move those shares to Chappell.
Yeah, I mean, kind of burned you would be putting it lightly. Really, he scorched me. He scorched so many of my lineups. But it didn't seem like the back was a problem with Kevin Chappell. Now you're going to get him. And because of the recency bias of him being relatively chalky at the Masters, doing so poorly that no one really wants to own him anymore, and they'll move on to other players in that area. So let's go to the chat right now. Take one off Twitter to start. Carl asks, is Vaughn Taylor healthy? Cares. Why was he WD so many weeks? And this isn't the NFL, man. I don't know. He could have just said, I hate this tournament. I don't want to play. Do you have any insight to Vaughn Taylor?
None. I mean, again, if you're at this range, you're trying to pick for straws here. And there's some guys I'm sure we'll talk about. Lucas Glover is one of those guys down there, but I have no insight into why Vaughn Taylor is WDing all these times. Maybe he just doesn't want to play.
All right, James from YouTube asks, who will be the most popular picks in Gup's one-and-done pool for the week? Well, I'm taking Siwoo, and I know that's not going to be a popular pick, although some people will steal my Siwoo monies. But I would guess Webb Simpson, Kevin Kisner, Brian Harman, potentially Patrick Cantlay, that whole range of the guys in the odds, even like the $9,000 range on DraftKings, the odds of like the 30 to 40 guys, I think that's where people are going to go. I'm not using Dustin Johnson, but it's an interesting week to use one of those top guys. Kuchar is going to be very popular as well. Yep. But if you wanted to use Dustin, Leishman, or Casey, I think this could be a decent week to get low ownership on those guys, and they're the betting favorites in the field. So that's normally a great way to play one and done, I think. What do you see the chalk moving to in one and done?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at one and dones, especially in this tournament, we've seen a guy like Wes Bryant come out of nowhere and really he was coming into decent form last year in this tournament. But this is a tournament that it really it allows a lot of guys to win, right? You don't have to bomb it off the tee. You can be surgical with the irons. Like a guy like Luke Donald, man. How many times have you talked about Luke Donald throughout this entire season? It's going to be one. So
that's not true. I remember you hyping him like 2 weeks ago.
I did, and then I no longer hyped him because I missed the cut. So Luke Donald is a guy that I'm sure is going to garner a lot of one and dones just because of his current form. But I think you're right. I think another guy is Grillo too. Grillo is coming into this tournament. You can make a case for him. Strikes the ball well with his irons. He did well at the Houston Open, coming to third. So he has current form. He didn't play obviously last week. So he has that rest from those guys. And so Grillo is another one that I could see could be a nice pick for one and done.
Evan asks, 60% Dustin Johnson, a fair risk to take given he could lap the field. I think that if you're going to use Dustin Johnson, and personally I am not, I'm not using anyone above $10,000 this week. That's why I'm so bad at DraftKings, because I do things like this. So that's what I'm doing. But I think that if you're going to use Dustin Johnson, right now the FantasyNational.com projections had him moving up overnight. He was down around 12%. He's up around like 15, 16% right now. So I think that you're going to see him come below, like hover right around that 15% barrier. I mean, 60% is probably too much. But if you really do think that he can lap the field. Now, I'm someone that does think that he can lap the field. I'm just betting that he doesn't do that this week. I think that's the territory where if he hits, you're going to win big. So I think if you're going to go invest into Dustin, I think I would personally break up some of those shares between Dustin and Leishman, because Leishman's going to be super under-owned. But yeah, if you're going to go on Dustin, you got to push, I think.
Yeah, and then those guys are also going to be on Kuchar, right? Kuchar is a course horse here. He's a name that is always going to be tied to die courses. So you're going to get a lot of ownership going to those guys. But like you were saying, I don't think you need to go 60% with Dustin Johnson. I don't think he's going to be that highly owned. So if you're going to do that, you can easily garner some of those and break it up a little bit where you have a guy like Leishman, where we saw how well he did the first couple of days at Augusta, where now he's coming into form where he's a guy, again, who strikes his irons really well. You don't need to hit it far. So if I were to move off of Dustin and diversify those shares, it would also be Leishman and even Harman too, but Leishman would be my pick there.
Yes, no, I really like Harman. I'm using a ton of Harman here this week, but I think the case that you make for like use some Dustin and spread it into Leishman, you can say the same thing with Casey as well. I don't think that you want to own just bits and pieces of all of these guys unless you're playing like 100, 150 lineups. But if you're narrowing down your core, instead of going 60% Dustin Johnson, maybe go 35% Dustin Johnson, because that's going to be double what the field has, and then move those other shares onto Casey or onto Leishman, whichever one that you prefer. Next question. Michael asks, favorite plays on $7,200 and under. You can check out my cheat sheet up on dkplaybook.com for this, but the ones that I'm really kind of going with, I really like Bill Haas at $7,200. Ben Raza talked me into him. Not that Ben Raza talks me into Bill Haas every time I have him on the show, and normally I just treat it as noise, but he is a die specialist, and he's the type of player, short off the tee, very accurate, great short game, can get really rolling on Bermuda greens that can play really well here. Austin Cook at $7,200 with the RSM crossover. Chris Kirk at $7,100. I also like Andrew Landry. Whee! Kim. I am personally using Jonas Blixt in 2 lineups, but that's me because I'm a crazy person, and I just feel like he shows up on once of every 4 die events, and we're now into the 4th. So I'm just playing that random chance, but I've seen him play well at Pete Dye tracks before, but that's not a recommended play by me by any means. And the last one I'm going to go with is Satoshi Kadaria. Again, when he's in contention at $6,600 come the weekend, I'm going to learn his name a little bit better, but he's currently inside the top 50 in the world rankings, primarily plays on the Japanese tour, just had a top 30 at the Masters last week. So he's a very good player. I don't expect a ton from him, but he just seems wildly underpriced, so I'm going to take a shot. Who do you like from down there?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Chris Kirk. I mean, this guy at 7,100. I mean, I like a guy a little bit above that 72 threshold with Scott Piercy. But
yeah, not the question. By the way, stick to the questions, not the question.
Yeah, Chris Kirk. Chris Kirk is the guy that usually you can't, for whatever reason, whenever I've used Chris Kirk in the past, I can't really figure out when he's hit, when he doesn't. But he's coming into this tournament. Good drive percentage is right there, top 15. Approach is there as well. And if you look at some of the course corollaries, like the RSM this past year, right, coastal course, short course where you don't have to hit it far, he's played well. And so below that 72 threshold, I'm going with Chris Kirk. And some other guys, like I said, like Lucas Glover, if we're going down below the 7K, is someone that I'm looking into as well.
Eric asks, Kuchar or Casey better for cash games? I actually think it is Kuchar. Obviously, the upside probably rests with Paul Casey, but Kuchar has a lot of history of playing the Masters, making the cut, and doing well the week before, then just coming to this tournament and finishing inside the top 15. Plus, he's cheaper, so that's always nice too. So I would go Kuchar and cash out of those two.
Yeah, same as here. I mean, can Casey rattle off those 7 or 8 birdies like he did the last time?
I'm sure he can, but it's... And this is another question from down the list that we'll get to in a second. I'll try to find it here. I saw it when I was just kind of scrolling through. Here it is, from Marshall. No, not from Marshall. From Jeremy. How much do you factor in the Masters/miscut narrative this week? Well, 27 of the past 35 winners of the Heritage have actually played in the Masters the week before. And the thing that you need to look at as it pertains to players that, make the cut at the Masters, they don't normally play in the RBC Heritage. So it's a skewed narrative when you think about it, because you're not getting a lot of the top-end players in the world traveling to Harbour Town the following week. So I don't think that you need to worry about it too much. I think I would kind of worry about the top-end guys more than anyone, especially ones that finish really strongly, like the Cam Smiths or the Dustin Johnsons or Paul Caseys, or even Leishman for that matter. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm fading them. The other reason is that I really like this $9,000 and $8,000 range. I really want to overload on that area. But I'm not putting too much into it, but it's something in the back of my mind. Do you look into it?
Not so much. I think you were saying any major is going to garner so much, right, the sweat and mental equity that these guys have to go through. So what you want to focus on is, are they coming into good form when, right, with the stats that we're looking at as key statistics here at this tournament. And when you look at a guy like Charlie Hoffman and Kuchar, these guys put a lot into 4 rounds. It's going to take a lot out of you, and it's a different course. So the guys that were hitting drivers a bit, you don't need to. It's not essentially going to hurt guys that are long hitters like Dustin and some of these guys, Xander. But at the same time, I don't put a lot of stock into it because, right, like you said, that stat of the guys that have played at the Masters, these guys are good. So I wouldn't put too much stock into it.
Jeremy asks, when is the percentage owned prediction sheet going to be posted? That will appear in my DraftKings cheat sheet column up on dkplaybook.com about 5 minutes after we finish discussing this. I wanted to hold off for a second to let the market adjust to Adam Hadwin a little bit, because that's really going to throw a wrench into it. I had it ready to go earlier today, and then I was like, let's take a step back from this. As soon as the rumblings came out, now that he's officially out, I can probably get that up for everyone within the next hour or so, depending on how long this chat goes. Again, please give the episode a like. It goes a long way to helping the algorithm figure it out and start popping up in people's feed. And frankly, that's what I want. I need them clicks. I live off your clicks. So please give the episode a like. Next one, Brian asks, quick summary / breakdown of the DK Golf Handicap. I don't quite understand what that means. Rick asks, Furyk has actually played better the last 2 tournaments. Not a question, Rick. Thank you for nothing. Thoughts on Hatton? King James. I actually like Hatton as a pivot play this week. I was sneakily going to use him in the one and done on my second team, but I noticed I had already used him in my one and done on that team before, so I couldn't do it. I used Luke List instead on that other team. It just seems like he's being forgotten about this week. And we know that even when you look at somewhere like fantasynational.com and run your numbers, it's always going to skew in the favor of American players over European players because it doesn't have the same data to back it all up. So when you're drawing some stuff from Hatton and you're going by like past 24 rounds, it might be taking stuff from like last January, not like this January, the previous January, at a potential WGC China or something like that from 2 years ago. So I think Hatton, skill-wise, is one of the better players in this field. And at his price, it's kind of like a price. There's other guys that you can definitely talk yourself into in that range, but I know a lot of people are taking Emiliano Grillo. I'm not taking any, and I'm putting those shares that I would have onto Tyrrell Hatton. What do you think?
Yeah, same here. I think, for me, actually, it's going to be Grillo, but a guy like Hatton is a guy that can play well. We've seen current form is great, right? At the Masters, he didn't really show out for us too much, and a lot of us had him. in terms of looking where he was coming into Augusta with some of the key stats that we're looking into. But a guy like Hatton, yeah, he's a guy that's played well. We saw him pop it at Mexico. We saw him, and he's a guy that's not going to. We talked about this. He's not going to garner a lot of ownership because people just don't like who he is. But he's one of the top players right now. So yeah, I would be fine as a pivot off of Grillo. Just for me, I'm in on Grillo. So at that price, I'm not taking Hatton.
And looking at the ownership projections right now of that top end, the two guys that are going to be sub 10% from the top 20 are basically Poulter and Hatton. And with Hatton, you get a better player for $500 less. So I think that's the move. He's projected right now to be more than half the ownership of Grillo and about half of Kisner. So yeah. I think that's a very logical pivot up in that top end. And you don't need a whole bunch of shares for single-digit Hatton. And we know, just look at the amount that he's won over the past 2 years overseas, the quality of player he is. And we keep talking about skill sets and what translates good putters, historically good putters, win at Heritage. Hatton is an excellent putter. So that is something to keep in mind. Next question, Sheen asks, who is the ultimate fade? And that goes along with Kyle's question of Luke Donald ownership projection. Slash fade. I'm not using any Luke Donald. He's very undercursed. We know all about the course history. He's been brutal, and watch him come in second place or third place again and just make us all look stupid. But I have him right now coming in around 14% owned in the giant $5. That's just too much for a guy who sucks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, same thing. I mean,
are you using any Luke Donald?
No,
zero shares. I'm going, like I talk about fade, I'm fading with 0 shares.
Yeah, the same thing. And we'll talk about it next year, which, like you said, will come top 5.
And we'll fade him again.
We'll fade him again. Gee, that was why. This is the Luke Donald Open, though. So, but yeah, I'm fading him.
Okay, next one. Kyle asks, are the par 5s reachable in 2? The 2 on the front they're just really tiny green still, so it's difficult to make eagles. And the par 5 on the back, you could potentially get there with an optimal drive, but you put yourself in a lot of danger going it for 2. So the only 2 eagleable holes are number 2 and number 5, which are the 2 easiest holes on the course. But even being a 502-yard par 5, the number 2 only generated 9 eagles last year. So it's not a course where maybe your Luke List and Dustin Johnsons and the high eagle rate guys can make one, but it seems more fluky than anything when it comes down to it. So they can be eagled, they can be reached into. Those are the 2 easiest holes on the course, but you have to just make birdie on those ones and move on your way, and you're still around the field. Thoughts on Brandt Snedeker? Feel like this might be a good comeback spot for him. This is from Marshall. I tend to agree, and the best part is no one's really on him, so you don't really need to own him all that much. I have him on 2 of 20 DraftKings teams. I did not bet him, though. Reed, what's your take on Brandt Snedeker?
Yeah, I'm splitting ownership between him and Graham McDowell because they're the same price.
No, but Graham McDowell sucks. So
he does, but he does well in coastal courses.
Yeah, like 20 years ago.
And he could come into fire. I mean, Luke Donald's the same thing, right? I mean, he was number 1 80 years ago, but people still are going to use him because of that tilt. So I was split between Brandt Snedeker and Graham McDowell. I will say, though, that Snedeker is right now a better player than McDowell. So, yeah, I like McDowell at that price, but there are guys in that price range, like a Han and your boy Si Woo, that are, I'd rather have more exposure on, but I'd be fine with Snedeker.
Yeah, I just divvied that up a little bit. Like I said, where I bet Si Woo, I didn't feel the need to push all in on him on my DraftKings teams. Plus, he's Si Woo. He's first or last, so I don't need him sinking.
You him on your DraftKings lineups? I thought that was an absolute no-no.
No, yeah, but I think he's going to win this week. So if I want to win one of these giant GPPs, I got to have him in. I have him on, I think it's 4 or 5 of 20 lineups. But I did split him up with Han. I used Patton Kazire from down there. But I didn't use a lot of guys in the $6,000 area. So I have multiple teams that have a lot of guys in that $5,000 area. And where I didn't go over $10,000, it's a lot of teams like Harmon, Webb, Kisner, formerly Hadwin, and then it'd be like 2 of the guys in that range. So you can really divvy it up a little bit easily. So I do like that a little bit. Jason asks, with Wes Bryant having as bad of a year as he is he a total fade? I like him at his price, knowing his irons can get hot. Thanks. Thank you, Jason, for submitting a question. I'm totally fading Wes Bryant. At least last year when he was coming in, he had flashed form. He had played well at Riviera. He had played well at the Honda Classic. He's just been garbage all year. This is the perfect spot for him to rebound because it's a course where that doesn't really factor in how horrible he is off the tee. It's a lot like the John Deere Classic. Very much the same thing. Just hit some fairways, get your irons hot, and make some putts. And that can be Wes Bryant's game, but he's going to have enough baked-in ownership because he won last year anyway that you're not being sneaky on the field with him. So someone else in the chat mentioned Rory Sabatini, who's made 9 consecutive cuts. I actually like Sabatini more than I like Wes Bryant.
Yeah, and there's guys in that price range and those odds that are a lot better. I think Austin Cook pops for me a little bit. So I'm going to be out on Wes Bryant. Like you were saying, he was coming into current form. And down here, you want win equity. So I can get where you're coming from a little bit because he actually won this tournament. But I like guys a lot better in this area than Wes Bryant. So I'm not going to be on him either.
Okay, next question. Rob says, all in on C. Woo! Kim? From a betting perspective, DK perspective, like I said, around 25%. That's risky enough for me as someone who generally does not play him at all. Next one is from Andrew. Thoughts on Emiliano Grillo as a GPP and one-and-done play? No course history is risky, but I feel like the ball striking upside is there. Putting possibly minimized with these small greens. Listen, I understand why people are in on Grillo. He's playing really well. The putter's getting hot at absolutely right time, and he is the type of guy that gains a lot of strokes because of his accuracy and because of his ball striking. Those are the guys you want. I just think he's going to be incredibly popular. Maybe I have a really bad read on that, but I haven't projected around like 16, 17%.
Yeah, same here. I'm going to be overweight, obviously, on Grillo. And what I like about him is, when he was losing strokes, if you look at Houston where he came in third, that was the one statistics where he lost strokes approach, and he still was able to come home and do quite well in terms of scrambling and putting as well. So I do like Grillo. Right, Kisner is right there, so I think he'll take away, obviously, some ownership because of how good Kisner is in all Pete Dye courses. But a guy like Grillo, he's coming into good drive percentage, top 10. In the last 24. So he's hitting the ball in the right spots, and that's what you need here. You need to hit the ball in the right spots to get the right approach into these greens.
For me with Grillo, it just turned out I didn't have enough room for him on the builds that I wanted to make because I like Kisner more. I like Hatton more. I like List more. I like Cantlay more. I like Harmon more. I like Webb more. So when you're the 7th guy in a range in my personal power rankings, then you're going to get left off. It's nothing against him. You can definitely make the case for him. It's just not going to be for me this week on Emiliano Grillo. CH3 this week from Kyle. Nah, not for me. You?
No, I can't do it.
Will David Lingmerth make the cut? I don't fucking know. If I knew who was going to make the cut, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be winning millions of dollars.
Exactly. Yes, there. I mean, how do we know? How are you supposed to project that? Yes, maybe at that range you can build a case for Lingmerth, but again, there are guys down there, Austin Cook, Lucas Glover, I like a lot more, so sure.
What has Lingmerth even been doing? Anything? Has he been good ever?
No, wasn't he a Cam Smith favorite last year? Lingmerth was always a guy that he picked.
Lingmerth has made 3 consecutive cuts, a 64th at the Valspar, a 64th at the Arnold Palmer, and then he made the cut at that Punta Cana event. He's lost strokes on approach in 4 consecutive events. He's lost strokes around the green in 4 consecutive events. He putted really well to make the cut at API, but that's about it. So, no, I don't see any sort of trend for Lingmerth. Listen, if you want to use the Blixt approach, like I'm using the Blixt to Lingmerth, I get that, because he will just pop twice a year. Billy Horschel, exactly the same way. They'll just pop twice a year. If you think this is the week that he pops, then use him, because no one else is going to be using him. But I have no real reason why you would. Nick Watney from Jeff Morris. I looked into Watney earlier this morning because I was looking at my first-round leader stuff. I was like, Watney's been playing really well recently. He's a really crappy Bermuda putter, and if stuff starts going the wrong way for Watney, let's say the irons don't keep up to the level that they've been. He's such an atrocious putter that he'll just be out of it right away. So instead of, like, we always think about, like, hey, these good iron players, if they just putt, then they're going to be at the top of the leaderboard. What happens if it works the other way, where if the putting stays the same and then he's not the most consistent player in the world, if the irons go the other way, you're looking at like a +7 at this course. So I'm intrigued a little bit. He didn't make any of my lineups, but if he's someone that you want to swap in, Rory Sabatini, very much the same way. Those are the types of players that you can mix in and out because they do have the statistical upside that you're looking for from some players. Jeff says, we look for values in other sports such as NBA and MLB. Wouldn't Coderia be considered a big value play in what is perceived in a weaker field? Would this be a week to punt with him in GPPs? I have used him in, like I said, 2 of 20 lineups. The problem is, and yes, you're always looking for value. The problem is with these Japanese players is that we're basing it off of official world golf ranking, and so much of his ranking is determined by what he does on the Japanese tour, which is probably Maybe the third best tour. Maybe, like, is it as good as the web.com tour? Probably not. So, like, it's like the fifth best tour in the world. It'd be like saying, oh, this guy is great in the MLS, but now he's playing in Champions League over in Europe all of a sudden, and he's like the best guy in MLS. Maybe he could be good, and I'm taking that shot that maybe he could be good. But the competition that he's beating up on is not of the highest quality. Now, maybe those skills will translate, but he could very well just be a $6,600 player who beats the crap out of guys that, if they were in this field, they'd be $3,500 players. So I think that's something you have to look at when assessing world golf ranking. There is the reason that I'm taking the shot because, hey, he is top 50 in the world, but I think you have to understand what goes into these rankings a little bit more. Eric asks, with so many good options this week, especially in the 8K and 9K range, if making 20 lineups, how many players do you need for a GPP? Again, I try to answer this every week. That's up to you. Honestly, if you want to use 8 players and make as many different combinations of that, go for it. Very high risk. You want to spread it all out? I mean, I like that strategy less, but you know, there's no set rule on what you need to put in your player pool. What would you do, Reid?
Yeah, same with me. I mean, I'm going core guys. We always talk about it, right? You want those core players that you can really build your rosters around. There are some variants of, like you were saying, there's guys down in the 6, you know, the high 6, low 7s that we are taking some shots on just so we can have some variance. So you don't want the same lineup for everyone. But these ownership projections and where we're looking at building our lineups off of, it's based off of, okay, are we playing these guys in our lineups? And if the answer is we're going to play this guy 50%, these guys should be in our lineups 50% of the time. So my strategy is always to find cores in each of the tiers, right? Too, if you want to just take it very simply, find cores in each of those tiers and see how you can mix and match. But I'm not going all willy-nilly. I'd rather have core players in each of those ranges where I'm all in, I'm in on, because that's what you want.
Brandon asks, when trying to compose your model on fantasynational.com, everyone can do that too. If you're a member of Fantasy National, there's custom models that you can create yourself and just go in and sort by whatever weights that you want, and boom, spits out some power rankings for you. It's the ones that I always release when I always tweet out my stuff, how my custom model ended up ranking out the players over a certain course of rounds. Do you try to narrow it down to, or sprinkle a little bit of everything that's relevant? I tend to go a mixture of both. I try to pick my 2 or 3 things that I'm really in on and weight those very heavily. Like this week with strokes gained approach, and my model's 30%. I actually put putting in for the first time all year. I weighted that at 20%. And then birdies or better percentage always makes any DraftKings model because that's where the points come from. So that's in there, and then I started mixing in like the key par 3 range, 175 to 200, par 4 scoring. I put good drive percentage in, and strokes gained around the green, and those were like 10%, 10%, or however many I wanted to go. I either weight accordingly at like 10%, or maybe just mix in a few things that are 5%. But I do try to pick 1 or 2 stats, or potentially 3, and kind of push on those to really skew my model in a different way. When you did your build this week, what did you do?
Yeah, I usually go with most of my tournaments, like you said, birdie or better. Ball striking, I think, is one of the key statistics that really show how talented, obviously, a player is, right? For this one, though, I did a little bit less ball striking and went tee to green, just because it factors in, like you were saying, around the green, that kind of stuff. So I'm going tee to green here. For me, also, scrambling was huge, right? Scrambling was huge here because of the small greens, because of how hard it is with greens in regulation. Par 4 scoring between that 400 to 450 yards because there's a bunch, and then par 3, right? Like you were saying, you want to make sure you're weighting these key statistics. Approach, right? We talk about Pete Dye courses. They are all about the approach. They're all about position golf off the tee. So not necessarily driving accuracy or off the tee, but good drives where you don't necessarily have to be in the fairway. You just got to be in the right spots. I mean, if you watch Sam Saunders too, he in his press conference this morning or today, he was saying, hey, he loves this course because even if he hits it off the, off the tee in the woods or whatever, the rough's not that thick, and then he can actually shape shots, a low fade or a high draw out of the rough or out of the trees. And so a course like this, you don't need to hit it in the fairway. You just need to hit it in the right spot. So approach, good drives, and some scrambling stuff I'm looking at.
Yeah, the one thing to note, understanding some of these courses when picking your stats is really huge too. Like you can look at, hey, there's some shorter par 4s, but you have to remember that this is the lowest driving distance course on tour. So some of those holes that are 412 yards play like they're 444. That kind of thing. You're going to have longer approaches into some of these holes than I think a lot of people expect. Next question comes from Trevor. Late join. Can someone tell me if Hadwin has been talked about and who to shift to once his withdrawal? We talked about that off the very top if you want to go rewind or watch on demand. I liked moving down to Chappell a little bit. I like the move up to Kevin. Now, the one guy that we didn't talk about from that area, and someone I actually kind of gave a hard look at the beginning of the week, and he might be shaping up to be one of the better pivots because no one's talking about him. What do you do with Ryan Moore?
Yeah, I could not. I was going to ask you the same question. I cannot figure out the life. This guy. There's no real, there's no real corollaries with Ryan Moore and Pete Dye courses, but I just could not figure out what I want to do with Ryan Moore. Obviously, he's right there next to Grillo, so and DeChambeau is a guy that I really like as well. So I'm not playing Ryan Moore, but I do like him. So I'm contradicting myself, and that's probably gonna bite me in the ass. But I just can't figure it out. I was gonna ask you the same question.
Yeah, he has 2 top 10s in his past 5 starts since coming back from his injury, and he played well at API. It's strange, though, because he didn't play well at Honda, and he didn't play well at Valspar, which are 2 courses that really mimic what you do off the tee here. And you would think, hey, it's Ryan Moore. He doesn't bomb it. He should be really good at these shorter courses, and he has won John Deere. So, and Wes Bryant is someone else who has played really well at John Deere over the years too. So maybe that there is a crossover. If you did want to get away from some of the ownership, if you had a lot of chalk builds, I think Ryan Moore is someone, it's tough to get if you would build all your salary cap and Hadwin is there. You can't just go up to Ryan Moore, but if you did have money left on the table, I don't see an issue with using your full salary cap if you wanted to move up to Ryan Moore, solely because that's not going to be a lineup that's duplicated anyway. And I mentioned, too, that I think if you do want a contrarian move right at the same price, a pivot, Jim Furyk is someone you can roll the dice on. He has been playing a little bit better. Again, leave your questions in the YouTube chat or use the DK Live hashtag on Twitter. Also include me in that tweet so I can see it. Thank you for that. And give the episode a like. Like I mentioned, goes a long way. Takes, literally like half a second. You can do that right now. Next question comes from Hockey3430. Thoughts on Billy Hurley III, BH3. He scores out okay on Fantasy National. I don't know exactly what you're looking at on Fantasy National, but I'm looking at Billy Hurley III right now in his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consecutive miscuts. He has gained strokes through approach just once. In his past 2 starts, he was 0.1 in one, 0.6 in the other, and a disaster the rest of the time. I get that the short courses could play into his favor. He'd have to get super hot, but I see nothing in his recent form to dictate that he's going to play well this week. What do you see?
No, I mean, I was just looking too because I hadn't done none research on BH3 sticks, but no, I mean, I think in all the key stats that I'm looking at, his highest is 99th over the last 24 rounds. So I'm not in on any Billy Hurley III. I don't know what stat model that guy's looking at, but if you like him, again, right? If you like him, take a shot on him. He could easily do something if you feel like he's correlating your stat model, but not for me.
Yeah, I don't think he could easily do something. This is Billy Hurley III we're talking about here. Ben asked, thoughts on Benny Ann? I just have such a bad feel for Benny Ann. I like him at courses where ball striking is really going to come into play. And I know that if he gets hot with his irons, he can hit a bunch of greens in regulation. And since it's really difficult to 3-putt at this course, Benny Ann could be good. Just didn't really do it for me this week. Are you using any Ben Ann?
A little bit. I'm looking at, I think he had a nice finish at 2016 Zurich. I think he came in the top 3 or top 5. I think maybe a second. So
I remember. I had money on him and Lovemark that week, and I think Brian Stewart won.
Yeah, and ball striking over the last 24, he's coming, he's top 5. And so I will have a little exposure on Benny Ann. But again, there's guys around that range too that you could fade Benny Ann. But for me, I like him. He's going to be, because I think a Willie McGirt is going to, garner a Fitzpatrick. You even see Xander Schauffele down there at 77. So, if you see a name like that at 77, you're probably going to garner a lot. It's going to garner a lot of eyes and a lot of exposure. So I like Benny Ann at that price.
Mike asks, how much Kiz is too much Kiz? He's currently at 65% this week. I'm at 55%, so 65 sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, Kisner, we talked about it after the WGC match play. I mean, there is a serious correlation with Kisner, and I'm sure that's the Kiz, not Patton Kazire he's talking about. That's the play. So whenever you got die courses, you're firing on Kisner because he is a maven on these courses.
Josh asks about one and done strategy. Would you use a top 10 guy like Leishman in a weak field or a solid playing and playing solid, or go down lower to like a Luke List. Well, Luke List probably is a top 10 player in this field, so he's probably included in that bunch. I think this is a good week to not use one of the chalky plays. So, and especially with Hadwin being eliminated, a lot of people, if you're going to use Adam Hadwin, who projected to be the highest owned pick in one and done to begin with, I doubt those people are going to pivot to someone who's like super low owned and risky. They're going to go on to Kisner. They're going to go on to Webb. Well, I think those guys are all excellent choices. I do think it is a week to get sneakier with an upside player like Leishman or like Luke List. I'm using Luke List on one of my teams, one of my 2 one-and-done teams, but even DJ. And, at the top end, everyone's going Kuchar, so maybe Paul Casey, that kind of thing. I think it is a week to use one of these really good but not super popular one-and-done picks. You think so?
Yeah, and we talked about it too. This season is the guys who potentially can't win.
Yeah, use Molinari or Charles Howell III, and boom, you got a winner in there somewhere.
Exactly. So yeah, you can garner some of those guys who aren't in the top 10, 20 to come in, and this is a good tournament to do that. We've seen it in the past.
Xander only gains Stokes off the tee so's. That's a good question. Thank you very much, Raul. Xander's a good player. When we talked about world ranking down at the bottom, he's underpriced in this field. And depending on what Xander can and cannot do, I like him better on Bent than Bermuda, I will say that. But in just terms of overall skill, Xander's, I always, listen, maybe I just have rose-colored glasses with Xander, but I've just watched this guy win twice in the past year, including the Tour Championship. And the Tour Championship is, I don't want to say it mimics this course a lot, but it's in the same region of the country, and it has a ton of water all around it, so you really have to be methodical with your tee shots at East Lake. So I think that Xander can figure this out on the fly pretty quickly. So I do like his upside in that range. Yeah,
and really good pivot off of Hoffman and Donald. Guys are going to garner ownership more so than Xander, right? So I like Xander as well in that spot.
Ponderosa Sports asks, DJ Hatton, stacked. Thoughts? Don't mind it.
Yeah, Na's good too. I don't mind it at all either.
Next one. No one has mentioned Mark Leishman. He's probably going to win the tournament. The one thing is he is not great off the tee, which is mitigated at this course. Thoughts on Leishman? Leishman's fine. Listen, you really want to make this argument, just make it about Dustin Johnson. It's the same thing. Either you want to go in, Leishman's going to be the lowest owned of the top 4, so I do like that. He has a win at a Pete Dye course in the past. And he putts well on Bermuda. There's a lot of things going for Mark Leishman. I just don't like those high-end guys that went deep into Sunday at the Masters. I just really don't. And I think that enough people will take them that if I avoid them, then I can pile up some of the chalkier 9K options together, which I don't think a lot of people will do. And therefore, I can expand my ownership on Webb, on Harmon, on Kisner, and even Cantlay. If I start triple stacking those guys together, I mitigate the damage that their high ownership is going to do, because very few people are going to do that.
Yeah, and you look at a guy like Mark Leishman too. He went deep into Augusta, right, into Sunday, and just kind of petered out. So, and we see this tournament in the past, guys who have won have come from behind. So even the 54-hole leaders, they're giving up the lead. So if Leishman is leading, or if he's coming back, can he go another 4 rounds, right, toe to toe, or can he get into a Sunday where he's now shooting 5-6 under to win the tournament? I'm not too sure. Again, hard to project, right, where his head's at right now, his energy level. But Mark Leishman, yeah, you can make a case for playing Mark Leishman. I won't, just because it was the guys that we talked about earlier.
JJ777 Mar says, you have to go with your gut more than statistics. He then says, gotta dig deep. He then says, going with the obvious is never good. Man, that's fucking insight right there. Thanks. Great contribution. Who are some of your pivot plays up at the top? I think that Leishman probably is of the very, very top end, makes the best pivot. And I mentioned Terrell Hatton in that range, along with Ryan Moore in the 8K range, do make really good pivots. I'd say Ian Poulter, because he's going to come in for low ownership, but I just don't love Poulter this week. Do you have any? I just feel like he's been playing too much. And we saw him gas out a little bit at the Masters. Now he's playing again. He's played well at Dye courses in the past. He played well here last year, just week after week. This is going to be his match play. Houston, Masters, 4th week in a row. Ian Poulter's no young buck. He might be running low on steam here.
Yeah, I mean, DeChambeau was a semi-pivot for me off of Hadwin, but now, I think it went with Hadwin DQing or withdrawing. I think you're going to see some ownership there with Bryson. You have to qualify the question too. What are we pivoting off of? Is it ownership? Is it price? Because DJ is a pivot, I think, in that ownership projection up at the top. So,
well, it's tough to pivot up to DJ though because he's so expensive.
True.
Like you then have to reconstruct the right. It's not like you're like, oh, instead of taking chalky Matt Kuchar, chalky Brian Harmon, I'll just go with Leishman because he's right in the middle, around the same price. It's not like, hey, I'm going to throw Matt Kuchar out of my lineup and just use Dustin Johnson.
Right, exactly. So again, Harmon again is a nice pivot off of that. Webb is another pivot if you're pivoting off a price, right, and you want some price relief off of those guys because of his track record. And like we mentioned, he's putting well, and usually Webb Simpson does not putt well. And so when he has a game that's coming into form on top of course history, he's also a good pivot there as well.
Kyle, Sean O'Haire 11th in his FantasyNational.com model, but is terrible at Pete Dye courses. Also missed the cut at the RSM Classic. Just looking a little bit deeper into what Sean O'Haire is up to, you do always have to like him at courses where length is never going to be that big of an issue, but it seems like he can't get his game on the same page. When he's putting well, he can't hit his irons or chip, and when he's not putting, that's when he's hitting his irons. So I'm not a big Sean O'Haire guy anyway. I'm not Jeff Ulrich. Jeff Ulrich is like the Sean O'Haire truther of us all, but no, I will not be having any Sean O'Haire. Will you?
No, not. I mean, we've seen it with maybe his wedge play. He's a guy, he hits his irons well, but he never really has all of his game firing at the same time. So I'm not going to be on Sean O'Haire either.
Are you going to use any Sam Saunders? I will not. You?
No, I mean, I like his press conference just because it was interesting to listen to when he was talking about the course, but no, I'm not going to use him.
Scott asks, Aaron Badley, thoughts? He was my last cut for my first round leader plays. He has won this tournament before. Short game and putting. Gotta love the bads, but the bads will give you the bad sads because when you open up your shot tracker in the morning and you track Aaron Badley, he's going to be in the middle of the woods at some point. Like, you know, and you'll think it's a shot tracker error, but it won't be. He'll just be in the middle of the woods because that's what Aaron Badley will do to you.
Yeah, no, if he's getting proximity, if he's hitting those greens, yeah, but he's just atrocious off the tee, so I'm going to be out on Badley as well.
Kyle asks, what are another corollary course besides RSM? I mean, breaking it down by Pete Dye courses can be one thing, but if you start looking at like Whistling Straits and Kiowa Island as opposed to this, that doesn't really make any sense, since those are bombers tracks. These ones aren't. So I think that TPC Louisiana is very smart to look at. There's no real stats from Austin Country Club, so you can kind of just see who played well there. I like the RSM, so both courses at RSM, the Sea Island, that's what they're called, right? Sea Island North, Sea Island South. I think that TPC Deer Run checks out quite well here, just with the strategy and the iron game and the putting that goes along with that. Colonial, I think, makes a lot of sense. That's the second part of the Tartan Slam where Kisner won last year. That's more of an accuracy irons putting course. And TPC Sawgrass. I think that is another crossover place just because of the same die tricks that happen throughout the course. It can get windy. It's same putting surface. So I think those are the courses that you would really want to look at. In terms of overall strategy off the tee, I think Pebble would help. I think Valspar would help. Colonial, like I mentioned. So I think there's a lot of mixtures that you can look at, but I think the RSM is probably the best. Colonial is probably second, then Sawgrass is probably third. Now, I could be way off on that. That's just what I'm choosing to look at to see if there's any crossover. Was there any extra courses that you'd add on?
Yeah, some less than driver courses like Sony. I'm also looking at just because, right, you don't have to hit driver. You have to, place position golf at Sony. So other than the courses that you mentioned, because those are all the ones that I'm looking at as well, I would just add Sony in there.
Next one, it scrolls on me too fast here. Joe Brown says, late ad, Purdy, Murdy, Hahn, Colley. Some of the harder par threes from my perspective. I prefer Hahn out of that mix. I know that he's getting talked up in a lot of circles, but Colley's going to have higher ownership. Trust me on this one. I have no Colley. I have some Hahn and other guys in that range. And you got to save Purdy Marty for next week in Texas. That's when the Purdy Marty break. That's when it's party time for old Marty.
Yeah, I'm on Hahn as well. He's top 5 in strokes gained approach in the last 24. Bud Colley, I mean, that's a Ben Ross's special, right? I mean, he loves playing Ben Colley because no one's going to be on him. So I can see.
Bud Colley's going to be chalky. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, so I like Hahn. I like Hahn, especially because he hasn't necessarily, placed well in the past. So I don't think guys are going to be on him in terms of that. And with the strokes gained approach as the #1 statistic for me as well, Hahn comes in very, very high. So I like him there.
Yeah, he's also the most consistent player of that group. Haven't heard much about Molinari, and he always plays well at Sawgrass. Molinari is just like the most mispriced guy this week. I actually did use some Molinari, and I never use Molinari, but just lock him into cash games. If you're going to use him in GPPs, he and Bud Colley are probably, along with Zach Johnson, going to be the double-digit guys from the 7K range. So know that going in, that you need to have like 20% or have none, but I'll have around 20% Molinari. Jordan asks, any Ollie love from you? I'm not going with Ollie. I get it. I get that he's probably a pretty good play, but he's the other one in that 7K range that I just know everyone's going to be on.
Yeah, and there's some cheaper guys that I'd rather play just because that ownership's going to be really high. So I'm off on Ollie as well.
Any love for Kim from D Ruff? Oh, you gotta believe you got some in there. The best putter on Bermuda. I mean, he's probably going to shoot like plus 38, but hey, if he gets that putter rolling hot, he's one of like the min price guys that can get through the cut. I do actually, in Sooth, I do have some Wee Kim in my lineups.
Who are all the other flyers? Because you mentioned quite a few. What are the other flyers that you got down in this range?
I already listed them. If you had just been listening, you would have heard them. Next one. Dane Palmer asks, you could pick DJ. Great question. Thank you.
Yes.
Let's see. At 12K, where does DJ have to place to justify the price? T5. It works one of two ways. I would actually say T3 based on how much more he is, but it also depends on how well the other guys at the top end too. So if Kuchar, Casey, and Leishman all miss the cut, then he can come inside the top 10 because all those lineups are going to be ruined. But I would say just from an overall projection, assuming the other guys play all right too, T3 you would have to get from DJ to pay off that price, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the highest price, you got to have that top finish. So.
Kokrak, question mark. Snorting the old Kokrak. There's too many other guys in his price range that I do like, but I was very intrigued and did a deep dive into him. And he makes sense. He just didn't turn out to fit around what I wanted to do. That comes to the thing of how do you like to build your lineup. So when I'm using James Hahn, Snedeker, I use some Keimer, Siwoo Kim, from just that $7,400, $7,500 range, it depends on how big you want to make your player pool. And I didn't want to make it so big that I just had pieces of everyone, so I didn't take, and I had Kazire and Charles in that as well, along with Bill Haas. So I mixed and matched enough guys already that adding more into the mix just almost diluted my player pool. So I didn't use Kokrak, but do you have any thoughts on him?
No, I mean, he stats out well for me in good drive percentage, but in terms of that range, like I said, Scott Piercy, even Streelman is a guy that I like just around his price range more than Kokrak, just because in stat models that I'm looking at in that price range and the rosters that I'm building, those guys are fitting into my lineups a little bit better than Kokrak. So I'm not going to have any Kokrak.
All right, so let's get a last call for questions for Reid and I about the RBC Heritage. Anything you want to ask, get it into the chat up on YouTube right now or tweet them at me. I'm going to scroll through my tweets here to see if I missed anything. And of course, if you're just tuning in right now, then you can go back and watch it on demand on the DK YouTube page, on the DK Live app, or just subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience podcast. It'll be up there within like 40 minutes, and you have all night to listen to it if you want. And I'll cut out all the parts with Reid, so you'll enjoy it more. In your face, Reid. The other thing is give the episode a like. That always goes a long way. So I'm going through Twitter right now. So nothing new on Twitter. This one, Rob asks, sprinkle a Colt Nost for the week? No thanks from me. You?
No thanks. No way.
How much do you weight past result? This is from the Dane. Would you pull the trigger on Luke Donald? We went over this in detail earlier. It's a hard no from the both of us on Luke Donald. Kyle asks, would you fade Webb due to high ownership? If you don't think that Webb is going to win or place inside the top 5, then absolutely. I tend to think that he's going to win or place inside the top 5, so I shall eat that chalk. Would Webb make a logical fade for you?
Yeah, for me, just because I don't think he's going to win. But again, you're going against, and maybe had that other guy that has some, he's talking about ownership in terms of where he's going to be. So yes, I think a guy like Webb is a guy you can fade based on ownership. But when you're looking at how well he's playing, he's played well on these courses before. If you feel like he's going to win, if you feel like he's one of your core players, eat the ownership because you don't need to worry about the chalk because if he's going to win, you want him on your lineup. So yeah, but I'm going to fade him.
Jeremy asks, who is your early favorite for the U.S. Open? I like Rory. I picked Rory to win before the year. I got him up at 40-1 with a Jags money line against the Steelers parlay. So I'm feeling pretty good about Rory right now. And I love that everyone's going to hate his guts after the Masters. Oh, Ricky's going to win the U.S. Open. Ricky's not going to win the U.S. Open. Rory is going to win the U.S. Open. Do you have any leans early?
I haven't done any, deep dive research into the U.S. Open. I mean, obviously, Ricky is going to be the popular choice. I do like that Rory call, but I don't. I mean, it's too early for me to make any sort of projections.
Alex White asks, Von Taylor been popping in my custom model. What do you think? His second Von Taylor question. I just bet him his first round leader and moved upon my way. It just seems like one of those courses where Von can get hot for like a round and a half, and then he'll go full Von Taylor on you. But that would be my take on it. If you want any piece of him, use him in like a showdown challenge weekend if he sticks around, or just bet him his first round leader.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing with me. He's not going to be a guy who's going to, I don't think he's going to play all 4 rounds where you're going to get that ownership, or you're going to get that success. So you're going to play Von Taylor, play him for first round leader.
Nick asks, this is Matthew Fitzpatrick. First Matthew Fitzpatrick shout out on the show, so I'm very proud of us. It's his favorite U.S. course, according to him, although he's never made the cut here. I don't know what it is with, like, in theory, this sets up perfectly more than any other course for Fitzpatrick. But hey, maybe if it was called the RBC Masters, maybe he'd play really well, but it's not. So I'm not using Matthew Fitzpatrick.
No, me neither. I just, you have to see it right. Yes, statistically, the course sets up for him nicely, but I'm the same with you. I don't see Fitzpatrick, and maybe it is the Masters hangover. I mean, this guy does play, or does, shell out at the Masters and can play well, but not for me, not this week.
Well, I mean, it could just be a regular hangover. He is British, so let's not forget about that. Last call for questions. Serious last call. If there's not more in the next 15 seconds, we're going to wrap this up. So I will tell everyone that there was a show on Monday. It was a Masters recap and the picks for the Heritage Course Breakdown with Jeff Feinberg. Still plenty of time to go back and watch that. On Tuesday, I did the show with Ben Raza, breaking down everything from a DraftKings perspective. It's kind of skewed at the moment because we talked about Adam Hadwin a little bit, but if you rewind to the beginning of this podcast and or video, you can find out what we're doing with Adam Hadwin as well. Dane, final question. This comes from you. James Hahn is a DK scoring machine, but has missed the cuts last 2 times here. Still a solid play at his price? Yeah. Reid?
Yeah, I mean, if you go course history when he, with die courses, Hahn doesn't stat it well, but he's playing too well at that price. Absolutely, I'm in on Hahn.
Charlie Hoffman or Zach Johnson? Neither, but I would take I would take Charlie.
Yeah, I'll take Charlie as well.
Are you using either one of those 2 in your lineups?
I'm gonna use a little Zach, just because he's played well on Pete Dye courses. I like where his approach game is, so I'm gonna, in terms of DK, I'd rather use Zach, but I think, I also think Hoffman is a solid play, but for me, it's going to be Zach more.
I always like Charlie Hoffman more as a DraftKings scorer, so I would use him, but I am not using either one of the 2 this week. I had to make some hard choices. I'm making some super hard stands on some guys this week to try to rebound from a real crappy Masters. So, Reid, tell everyone where they can follow you on Twitter and find all your work.
Yeah, so on Twitter, it's Reid T. Fowler. All the stuff on DK Live, DK Playbook. We go through the course previews every week. You can also check on my YouTube channel. It's just Reid T. Fowler, where we have all of that stuff that's coming off of the Masters and everything, and all that good content. So Reid T. Fowler everywhere.
All right, you can subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience on the DraftKings YouTube page or the audio podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere you can download podcasts. You can get the Pat Mayo Experience on demand. Oh, one more question filtered in. Trevor asks, any Cantlay use or drop to list or Kisner risking the chalk, already using the always loved Cam Smith? I am not using Cam Smith this week. That's where I'm making my hard stance. The rest of them, I'm using all of them. So that's a lot of fun. Anyway, you can check out all my work up on DKPlaybook.com. My betting cheat sheet is out on my Facebook page right now. And I got to get out of here because I have to go update the ownership projections and pivot plays from my column now that Adam Hadwin is out. Thanks you everyone for tuning in. Please give the episode a like. Like I mentioned, goes a long way. And good luck at the RBC Heritage, whether you're betting, whether you're playing DraftKings, or just a fan of Webb Simpson, who's probably going to win. Or see, Kim, who is definitely going to win. Don't hold me to that. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.